beautiful when you're in it. And she asks what he's talking about, and he changes the subject. And, you know, going through the process that movies go through getting edited, Francois had said, you know, it's so beautiful in front of you, you don't need him to say it. You know what he's thinking. So the line was cut out. But I remember watching the film and thinking, you're right, it plays because he's looking at this city, and it's just so beautiful from inside of it. And I loved that, you know. Your perspective changes depending on where you are, but if you stop to look around, you can always appreciate the things around you. And I thought that was just a moment in the movie that I really appreciated. My mom grew up in New Jersey, right outside Manhattan, and would spend all her time as a kid going into the city with her dad on the weekends, and to hear her talk about even what New York was and what the area in New Jersey that she grew up in was. And it's very interesting that no matter what, things change, and as the little individual unique places get swallowed up by social uniformity, you realize that you're not just losing an establishment or, you know, a counter for a soda fountain or whatever, but you're losing memories, you know, things that people remember. There are places that have been swallowed up in our country where people got engaged or had their first children or, you know, lost a loved one, and they're gone. And it's an odd thing when you think about it, and it really shocks you. At least it shocks me, that hollow feeling that comes from that kind of loss, because those things don't come back. And it was an interesting thing to look at that theme in the movie and to figure out how to make it relevant, because it doesn't seem that shocking. Of course, you know, Brooklyn is changing and New York is changing, and it doesn't seem as big of a deal, the change a year ago to now, as it would, you know, in the 50s to now. But for a lot of people, it's a big deal. The first and foremost reason that I wanted to do the film, I've always loved mafia movies. Who doesn't love Goodfellas? And, you know, who hasn't seen Donnie Brasco over and over? They're just amazing movies. But again, those are of eras past. And I think people in my generation and a young generation, maybe they've heard of Al Capone or they've heard about the Gotti family. But it's really, at the most, it's like I feel like teenagers have seen a Gotti in like Us Weekly or something. It's not the same thing, the same hush-hush, under the table, watch your back and be careful in your neighborhood thing that it was when my grandfather was young. Hearing stories from him about what the mafia used to be fascinated me to no end. I just could never get enough of it. And what I enjoyed about reading this was realizing it's sort of an appropriate mafia story for right now, because it's still around. Trials are still going on and testimonies are still being given, and it's relevant. But it's a little different. It's a little smaller, and it's quieter, and it's more, you know, brown paper bag, bottom shelf. It's a different thing, and I really appreciated the realism of how a young guy who's looking toward a very modern future could sort of get swept up in a notion that, for my generation, seems kind of archaic. You know, all of a sudden, this kid who wants to be a photographer finds himself a runner for a mobster. But it happens. It still happens. And that's why I loved it, because it didn't feel like I was watching, you know, a 70s movie with wide lapelled suits and skinny ties. It was very relevant to my generation, and I think that that's why it's exciting, because it brings a little bit of that world that we're all so fascinated with into our present day. The message, I think, for people is, what kind of a choice are you going to make? What are you willing to do to get the life that you want? What roads are you willing to walk? What are you willing to give up? What are you willing to sacrifice? Are you willing to threaten your life and the lives of people you love, whether it's the mafia or not? No matter what it is. It's very relevant when we're looking at a time where people are really struggling and people are feeling like their dreams are being lost because the ability to have dreams, the ability to dream them at all, is diminishing every day. It's a very scary climate in the world right now. And what do you do when you're presented with it? Do you take it? Do you eat the apple?